So there's this sort of concept, this sort of idea that's sort of percolated through my life. I'll put it that way. Like that's something that's sort of come up from different people from different angles and sort of a pattern that I've noticed. And I'm going to call it, going straight ahead. And it sort of comes from the concept of animation. In animation, there's two forms of sort of generally animating. You can either do like keyframes and poses, and then like you do the in betweens, and you sort of draw the keyframes first, and then you do the in betweens in on ones or twos or whatever, based on the amount of fidelity you want in that motion. So the one concept though, or the part of this concept is that you could have one person do all the keyframes, and they could have a bunch of people called in betweeners sort of come in and do all the in betweens. And it's sort of like a structure, a way to organize, a way to get more things done. But we're talking about the alternative. The concept is called straight ahead. And so straight ahead animation, you draw one frame after the other, and you're just going forward. In smaller scale productions, this works better, and in other forms of animation, it's the only way you can do it. If you're trying to do stop motion animation, you have to go straight ahead. You can't like position the character and then move it back and then move it. That'd be a freaking nightmare to like try to keep all of that together. Or, like in this, you have to go straight ahead. You got to go from one frame to the next and just push on through. I've known about that for a long time. This is something I learned in like a community college animation course, and that in that animation course, I think was really really helpful. Just as a one-on-one course because it instead of saying, hey, this is the type of animation that like we do or that you're going to be doing in your career, it was more like, well, this is the one-on-one animation course, so we're going to go over all the different types of animation we can think of. And of course, one of those was stop motion, and you really got to see like and a few other types of animation as well. But it was like a lot of it you just had to go straight ahead. It was the only way you could do it. I didn't really make this connection till much later, but I saw this interview by I think it was Warner Herzog, the documentary guy, and he was talking about how like he doesn't shoot a lot of coverage or he doesn't shoot a lot of footage like of his scenes. He just shoots the scenes. And he said he's like, well, I know what I want, and so I'm just going to shoot what I want, right? I'm not going to like pussyfoot around and like try to have like eight alternate angles or whatever. It's like no, I know what I want and I shoot it, and then I edit it and I'm sort of done. And he was talking about how like you see some like younger filmmakers who just shoot everything and then wind up with like 90 hours of footage and they can't get through it, right? And like how do you make a film out of like 90 hours of footage? To him it was just mind-boggling, right? It's like you just get what you need. I like that was sort of a really like interesting sort of powerful idea to me because it was this concept that like if you're gonna walk in and do something, you should know what you want to do. You shouldn't be stumbling around, at least not too much. You should, have a real direction and a goal. And I think a lot of times, people, they won't necessarily have a goal going in, or they'll have a very vague goal, and then they think they do that stumbling of like 90 hours of not knowing what they're doing, and to get two 90 minutes or 2 hours of footage or whatever down into like a movie length, right? And I mean, I'd also encountered something like a similar concept to this is like waterfall software development. And waterfall software development is like you work on a system and then you flow into the next one, you flow into the next one. Sort of a waterfall working your way down until you've completed all the tasks and the piece of software is done. This is widely regarded as a terrible way to develop software. But then I heard about this guy who was working on it. He was working solo, but he was working on a procedural generation system. So this means he has to write essentially a collection of mini programs that all create data that feed into each other to generate a much larger program. And sort of his rule was when he was developing, he's like, I basically, once I build a generator for like a thing, like assuming your generic medieval fantasy, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings type thing. It was like, if I develop a generator for like noble houses and their sigils, once I've done that, I don't like go back and change that. I don't try to go back and make that feed into other or like tie other systems into that. I just take the outputs from there and I can use that to feed the new things I make. But I don't go backwards. Always went forwards. In a way, he was really getting a weird sort of benefit of waterfall, which is that like once you're done with what the thing you did or a portion of what you did, you know what's there and you can tie into it. and it's a very stable sort of thing. Just kind of in this similar vein of like, Herzog understanding, what he wanted to shoot and that he was just going to shoot it. He had a very sort of stable sort of understanding of what he was going to do. Just like stop motion animation. You have a very stable, like, the last frame isn't going to change. You already shot it. So unless you want to throw the whole scene away, like, you got to move through it. You got to keep going. And so doing it in one take, and in some ways like a game jam is like this, right? You don't have enough time, take a system, throw it out, redo it. Like, no, you just got to go with what you got. And I think that's sort of a very powerful thing. Something to definitely keep in mind as you're working and like going forward. Like, do you really know what you want? Are you willing to work on this and just and call it good and just let it be? Going back and just trying to refine everything. In a way, it's part of game development and it's a part of like getting to that like first sort of playable stage. But I would say that before you start playtesting, you probably shouldn't start changing. If you're wandering around in the weeds and like implementing little things here, implementing little if you don't have a clear goal of what you want, like you should have that. And ideally, that goal should be like you should be laying that down and like how the player is going to experience and how they're going to feel about certain circumstances. You build your systems in support of that, and then you don't start changing stuff until you actually get in there and you start seeing like what players are actually saying. Werner Herzog, stop motion animators, I'm sure this guy building this game, they all did either screen tests or play tests, and they all probably made some tweaks to what they were doing for the stuff that didn't land. But in that very like focused part of production, they just decided to like jam through it and know exactly what they wanted to do, so they weren't going to be throwing away half, or what it sounds like in some of these indie cases, most of their work. Yeah, just something I keep thinking about and trying to be a little bit more deliberate on.